we're going to have to take different kinds of steps in order to prevent something like this from happening. Now, those who were killed and injured here were gunned down by a single killer with a powerful assault weapon.
Welcome back to another edition of Enough Said. My name's Dan Barrero, joined by my co-host Justin Gard. And Lori Fisher's off this week, which means Brett Adkins has those huge shoes to fill. Get us started for us, Brett.
Hi, guys. You just heard the president addressing the nation after the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. 49 people are dead, another 53 injured after a gunman opens fire inside a busy nightclub in Orlando, Florida. Now, here's what we know about the gunman. His name, Omar Mateen. Apparently, he made some threats online before pledging allegiance to ISIS. Dan?
Well, there's a lot of ground to cover here, and to quote Mr. Rosenbaum, who we already miss, this is sort of where the rubber meets the road, in that I think this story, based on what we think we know thus far, is the worst case dreams coming to reality among experts on these kinds of stories, because what we have is, in this case, despite what Donald Trump says, a U.S. citizen, probably radicalized, probably with a number of other issues to go along with it based on what we know. And so how do we stop someone in that scenario? And what makes this even more frustrating, Garzi, as you know, is a lot of people did what they were told by James Comey, the FBI director, to do. They had issues with him about things he said, threats that he made other employees. They go to authorities. He's investigated a couple of times. The FBI decided whether they dropped the ball or said, we don't have enough because we do have, due process in this country. That got nowhere. A gun store, not that long ago, said, this vibe isn't right.
They made a phone call.
They made a phone call. And ultimately, in that case, the problem was they couldn't identify the person involved. So it shows you that as much as people want to say, we've got to take care of this, how difficult, in this case, where movement was made and this person, to a certain extent, was identified as someone that had caught people's eyes.
Trouble as a kid, suspended a lot as a teenager, up and down emotionally. You mentioned the coworkers. You're almost relying on family members turning somebody in at that point. And we know the wife now may have known more than she let on originally. Try to talk him out of some stuff. But if you're relying on family members to turn on their own, that's difficult, right? The dad, who's been
unrealistic.
Well, the dad has been very strange too about, my son was a normal kid. He was suspended 31 times in 7 years. I don't necessarily qualify that as normal in my world. But so what do? I mean, the dad says he's normal. The wife doesn't turn him in. You're basically in trouble because all those dots were there. In 2020, hindsight being 2020, all the dots were there, but they could never fully connect all of them, and he never did anything before. All it takes is one time. Had he had another outburst or another attack, it would be very easy to connect those dots, but unfortunately, you're waiting for the one big boom, the one big blow, and that's what we had in Orlando.
We're back to the difference between words and actions. And in this case, there didn't seem to be any actions that could be proved to the point where they could step in and say, and again, we're back to, this isn't like Casablanca where you can just round up the usual suspects and just make them go away. If we're going to try to pay attention to the rule of law, it complicates things. And believe me, I'm convinced that individuals who are capable of this aren't stupid about that. They use that against us. That's part of the game that makes it more difficult for us. And so everybody's looking for the magical answer. And I know we're going to get to the politics of this here pretty shortly. I don't think there is one. And that doesn't play well, maybe on this show, probably doesn't play well on talk radio or TV, but that's the fact of it, is this is not, we're finding out again as we keep going through these, however you want to identify what was in play here, this is not easy stuff.
And ISIS loves it because they never even had to meet the guy.
Correct.
Right? He never had to go over there to be radicalized. He never had to go to some school. He just had to look at a couple of things online and agree with a couple of things. And
you guys, I want to jump in right here because like Dan said, let's stay on this mass shooting. But let's bring in the topic of gun control because this has taken center stage in the race for president. Donald Trump planning to meet with the NRA. He already has their support. Trump pledged to protect the right to gun ownership and says Hillary Clinton wants to abolish the Second Amendment. Take a look.
I'm going to save your Second Amendment. Totally. And Hillary wants to abolish the Second Amendment. Remember that. Now,
we do need to stop terrorists from getting their hands on the tools to carry out attacks so easily, especially assault weapons, military-style assault weapons that have no place on our streets.
Now, this all comes as Senate Democrats and a nearly 15-hour filibuster early Thursday that addressed both the need to expand background checks and ban those on the terror watch list from ever buying a gun. Dan.
Well, here we are again. That the problem with this debate for me is you're either with me or you're against me. It's either all about guns or it's all about Islamist, radical terror, whatever term you want to use.
You can throw mental illness in there as well.
And throw mental illness in this as well. It's as if, the sad part is, if you want to talk about perhaps tightening gun laws that may or may not have impacted in this case, let's not forget that sadly we're talking about the numbers which count. Every person counts, but not necessarily being able to prevent this on the basis of some of this assault stuff not being available. But if you even go down that road to say, well, do we want to make it a little bit harder, potentially, and look into that? Well, you must hate the Second Amendment. You hate America. If you want to say, well, we also need to do a better job of identifying what this is when it comes to the terror aspect of it, not being afraid of it, you're giving in to fear. You are going to profile an entire religion. And so there's no legit, reasonable conversations that go on. It can be about all of this stuff to varying degrees.
It is about all this stuff. It is about all that stuff. Everybody agrees a lot of things have to change, but not what they don't want to, right? It says, well, I'm not going to change what I believe in, and they're all in their corners. If it was a boxing ring, we talked about Muhammad Ali recently. You got Muhammad Ali over here and Joe Frazier there, and they're never going to meet in the middle. No. They're never actually going to go in there and settle anything. They're just going to stay there. The watch list correlation, we've talked a lot about that. And I guess response that, well, a lot of people are on there that shouldn't be on there. Does that make it difficult? What do we say on that number? Maybe 400,000 people are on the watch list.
Depends on which list you're talking about. You're talking about the terror list or the no-fly list. Those are two different lists.
I know there's 322 million Americans, and I know there's about 400 to 500,000 on any of these lists. You know I'm not great at math. That's less than 1%. I think it's even less than 1/2 of 1%. So if we're inconveniencing some of those people that maybe want to buy a gun on the off chance that they want to and are on these lists, I'm sorry, I'm playing the odds there that 99.95 are fine.
But again,
we're protecting those guys.
But we're back to politically, it depends on who's in power in terms of how important people think due process is, and that's part of this game it's hard to trust anybody on this because your position seems to depend largely upon who's in power. And who is behind the scenes.
And next week they all agreed nothing's going to happen.
Let's switch gears here to Jesse Ventura. He was awarded nearly $2 million, winning 2 major claims against the American Sniper author Chris Kyle. Now, a federal appeals court tossing it all out. Ventura had sued over a story about Kyle punching him out at a California bar. You might remember that. But a judge now says the claim is invalid under Minnesota law. Dan.
Well, I'm not the great legal mind, and it may well be that the ruling is correct in terms of the decision being flawed on the basis of the law or what the jury was instructed regarding, for example, the question of who would pay. Would the family have to pay? Would the widow have to pay?
Or the insurance.
Et cetera. I'm in the minority on this because, look, everybody likes to pound on Jesse. I always felt, I don't know what happened in terms of what Jesse was alleged to have said, but I always felt whether the person who wrote that book had died or was murdered or not, or was alive or not, he had every right to stand up and make a point given the seriousness of what he allegedly said. I just don't think, you got to separate whatever you think about Jesse and how bombastic he could be, Trump light, if you will, in some ways, although they're very different politically other ways. To me, you got to separate that and say he has a right to defend himself to that kind of a charge, regardless of what the backdrop of the story is. It's not about necessarily the widow. It's about basically defending yourself on a pretty significant issue.
It's easy for us at 30,000 feet to say that's not how I would do it if I were Jesse. I would let my own reputation and my own name and my own accomplishments kind of stand on their own. But we're not in that situation. It's easy for us to say that we wouldn't do this and let it go and let the family grieve and let the wife move on. She lost her husband, all of those things. But we're not in his shoes on this one. And we know how much his service meant to him. We think we know how much his country meant to him. We know he threatens to move to Mexico basically every other week. We're not in his shoes on this one.
And there was some significant.
This past 3-4 days has been horrendous on our community, and then to find that a family lost their 2-year-old to such a tragedy, and that mom and dad were there to witness this, I can't comprehend.
Welcome back to Enough Said. The body of a toddler snatched by an alligator in a Disney World lagoon. The 2-year-old wasn't swimming in the water. He was playing by the edge. His father tried to rescue him but was unsuccessful. Legal experts now wonder if the Disney resort did enough to warn guests about gators. Dan?
In a word, no.
Nope.
They didn't. I know this is literally, we think, the first time this has happened in the history of Disney World, which goes back decades, I think, if I'm not mistaken. That shouldn't matter. Having actually just stayed near there very recently, it's a bit of a game, I think, that Disney plays in that they create, there's this man-made lagoon, and then they go, well, it'll look nicer if we put a little beach there, even though we don't want you to get in the water at all. We want you to have that illusion that there's ocean there or whatever, water next door. And so to put up a sign that says no swimming and yet create a beach that a lot of people do use at night, especially to watch fireworks.
And that's what the family was doing, watching the movie.
It's ludicrous. So to me, this isn't even a close call. We've heard from a lot of people who said, well, you know what?
Your environment.
Says no swimming.
I know.
That's not enough. If you create a beach, that's not enough. You need a sign to say, and Disney didn't put this sign up because they didn't want to put this sign up, because it's not an inviting sign that says there might be alligators here. No swimming. Do not go in or near the water. But then they lose a little of those aesthetics, and that's precisely why they went the direction that they did.
Disney already knows they haven't done enough because Disney's already changing the signs.
Yeah, I think the lawyers probably.
They had to change the signs, and they knew. It's not like they didn't know alligators were coming in there. The wildlife people said, we've dealt with them on this. Right. They called them nuisance alligators. That's a little light for me,
I didn't know.
think.
Yeah, that seems like redundancy to me.
Nuisance alligators, and we do our due diligence, and we get them out of there. We've heard the argument a lot. If you go to Florida, you need to know your environment. You need to know where you are. You know that alligators are down there. The state school, the mascot is the Gators. I'm sorry. Be realistic. At Disney World, that's the last thing. I haven't been there as recently as you, but I've been there enough, and I'm never thinking about alligators. And I guarantee you, a family from Nebraska that is going there for Mickey and Minnie, they're not thinking about, I wonder if there's alligators in these waters.
I would still submit to you that even with the signs up, if they're smart, they take away the beach, is what they do.
Well,
and
they need to rethink it for sure.
They need to rethink it because, again, they kind of want it both ways. Don't make it even possible to a certain extent. And I don't mean you have to put a Donald Trump-sized fence up or a wall, but some other way to deal with it. And look, we've talked over the years about a lot of these stories, and I rip parents on a number of them. This ain't the one.
No.
This is not the one where, to me, it's on, you take care of your kids. A sign said. If you've been in that environment, you've seen that situation, and you see Disney basically, hey, yeah, stop. Here's a great place to watch the fireworks. Give me a break.
And other hotels,
it's on them.
We've heard other hotels down there are very clear, whether they're on the property or they're off the property, that this water might contain some alligators. Make sure you're paying attention. We hear from people that lose dogs frequently when they're just going out to walk dogs. Every parent is feeling this one.
All right, guys.
Every single parent has been feeling it this week.
Time to move on here. ESPN showing some graphic, never-before-seen photos in its new O.J. Simpson documentary. They show crime scene photos of Simpson's wife, Nicole, and her friend, Rob Goldman. Between this documentary and HBO's The People vs. O.J., the case really getting brought back to life here. Dan?
Well, I had originally had not expressed much interest in this series just because I thought, what's left?
You went the opposite.
It all. And then I blundered upon part 2, and I thought there was some pretty enlightening stuff there. And the part since I thought was okay. I think some of it was old territory. They do have a lot of new interviews. And if you do that well, that's what you could bring something, when you could bring something new to the case. The part to me that was new and depressing was, I think the perception then a little bit on O.J. before we found out a lot of stuff was he suddenly snapped. And what we learned is, no, he had been snapping probably 7, 8, 9 times in the past that we didn't even know about because the cops, it's OJ. I'll go to the house. OJ, you got to kind of keep it down. It's a little out of control, and I'd love if you could sign this helmet, while I'm here. That to me is the tragedy of it. Is I think we found out that it may have been quite preventable if judges and cops had done their job in a different time when it comes to domestic violence. I'll grant you. That's what I thought they did a great job of uncovering in a way that I don't remember.
It's good because you found something new, but also you lived that as an adult. I was 12 or 13 years old, and I, of course, remember it because how could you miss it back then? And it was televised for the first time.
But you're not thinking of it the same way.
I'm not thinking about the racial climate.
Right.
I'm not thinking about the police incompetence. And if I am, I can't really process it like hopefully I can do now as somewhat of an adult. The violence, the photos of the murder scene, the 911 calls, which I remember hearing as a 12-year-old, but not really processing them like you do now. And there's people younger than me, believe it or not, as sad as that is for me to admit, that have no idea about any of this, that weren't born, that were 1 or 2, that now can see this. It's probably the best, I think, piece done on it. And I've seen a lot of it. And it's just different. The documentary, the interviews, the styles, it's very well done.
And I think it's fresh again, for example, because of the Rodney King video. First time we can remember that video was captured while cops didn't know it was being captured.
Yes.
And we're still talking about those kinds of cases today, and that really was the start of a process.
Thompson chased by LeBron James, hooked away from behind, then releases. And Curry has to back off as James throws it down.
Well, welcome back to Enough Said, and it looks like we've got a series, Guardsy. 3-3 now in the NBA Finals after Cleveland dominates again last night. A series that Golden State, you and I both picked Cleveland to win the series.
We did.
And then we gave up on the picks.
We did.
When Golden State was up 3-1, and it looked like it was not even going to be a contest.
I think we gave up at 2-0.
We might have.
From what we saw.
Cleveland now has made it a winner-take-all Game 7 Sunday night in Oakland, California. And what fascinates me about the way this has gone and the way it finished was that I went into this series believing, if you're doing a poll on people who don't have a vested interest in either team, that Golden State was actually the sentimental favorite, notwithstanding those who believe in Believeland.
Believeland.
Yeah,
1964, they needed a title.
Cleveland needed a title.
Yep.
I really think, because I still think people are polarized to a certain degree on LeBron, and Golden State was like this perfect team. Best record ever, defending champions.
Likeable.
Draymond was a little on the edge, but basically a likable group, good team basketball. Then we get to last night's game, and it's not Draymond who's coming unglued. It's the MVP,
unanimous,
Steph Curry,
back-to-back.
Unanimous MVP, and suddenly I think that's followed up by Kerr whining afterwards, Curry's wife going off on Twitter, and I think for Game 7, if you redid that same poll, I think more people are now rooting for Cleveland the way the Cavaliers the last 2 games have just gone about their business, and the way LeBron has done what many of us have asked him to do. Assert yourself in a way that is your only chance to win the series.
I think bringing LeBron into this conversation is the right thing to do because the Warriors have acted like pigs. I mean, Steph, the body language on Steph, we talked about that in the Western Conference Finals.
In that series.
If things aren't going well for him, he's an amazing pouter. And we like people that have fun.
Right.
That's why they're so popular. But when you pout when things don't go your way, then we remember you as...
throw mouth guards.
Exactly. We remember you as, aren't you the front runner, the wacky warm-up guy? You'll take shots from wherever and it doesn't matter. We remember that and say, well, maybe you're not so fun-loving all the time. It's probably somewhere in the middle for Steph. But part of this is LeBron has become, again, like he did last year in the finals, a monster and amazingly likable. He's a body language guy, too. And we've ripped his body language before, how he's acted.
Right.
It's hard to argue with his body language now.
No.
The scoring is incredible, but for me, he's getting every rebound. He's stepping in defensively. He's making ridiculous passes, and he somehow got Kyrie Irving to join the party because he's been great as well.
And he hasn't needed Kevin Love to do it.
He hasn't.
Which is
I felt bad
proof
for Love.
of his value.
He played well for the 90 seconds at the beginning of the game last night, and then he got a stupid second foul, and he had to go to the bench.
All right, guys, I'm going to jump in here.
They could still win the series, but
and they might.
They've really revealed a side of themselves that you go, Hey, really? That's there too, huh? That's good to know. We'll note that.
Brett Atkins has
All
never
right,
revealed
yeah,
a bad
let's
side.
let's get on with lightning round. Ever so fast-paced all the time. We're kicking things off with Ichiro Suzuki making 4,257 hits throughout his career. That passes Pete Rose's record, but not without some controversy, mainly because some of those hits were made during his time in Japan. Dan.
There's no controversy.
Nope.
I don't know how there can be a controversy. I don't know why. It's the old deal. We got to have another feel-good story. It's good enough. His career is feel-good. Suzuki's a remarkable guy.
He'll be a Hall of Famer.
He's a Hall of Famer, but he got a bunch of his hits playing in Japan until I think he was 27 years old. Pete Rose is not being an ungracious, old, get-off-my-lawn guy saying, guys, we're happy for you, but he did not eclipse my record. The answer is he didn't. End of story.
Most amazing thing about the story is Ichiro Suzuki is still playing baseball.
Yeah,
Who
that's
knew?
true. Yeah.
I didn't know until I saw him in the batter's box at Target Field. He's down in Miami, so I don't know if that really counts.
Well,
Because they're barely a major league
half and half,
franchise at
probably.
this point.
That's true.
Their own fans don't even
All right,
know they're
guys,
there.
let's talk Twins. All-star closer Glenn Perkins out for the rest of the season, mainly because he has to get surgery. Justin.
Hard to envision him pitching again for the Minnesota Twins, isn't it? Given what
Got another year in his contract.
he does, and he might be ready for that year
Yeah.
in 2017. This injury is expected to shelve him for this season, of course, for the entire offseason. There's no guarantee he's ready to go in 2017. And then what's the rehab process like? Interesting career, though, really, because when he was good, the Twins didn't matter. So it didn't matter that he was good.
High-pressure situations.
Exactly, and when the Twins were okay, I can't say they were good last
Right.
year, but when they needed him last year, he was unavailable, and now so there's just been this mismatch, and
Look
I don't
how
know how
things
we'll
have
remember
changed
it.
for him, though. I mean, he still got his money, but as you said, first half of last year he was unhittable, all-star, everything's wonderful, and now his career could very much be in
could be.
jeopardy. Like
All
you
right,
said.
guys, prosecutors blocking the judge who sentenced former Stanford University swimmer Brock Turner to just 6 months in jail for raping an unconscious woman. Many calling that sentence far too lenient. Dan.
You're being far too kind, I would say. I'm calling it far too lenient. It's a despicable sentence. It's an indefensible sentence. And sadly, you know who's making it worse? His family members
They are.
opening their mouths, making it sound as if
He's the victim.
this has really inconvenienced my guy and he can't eat. And we're also learning a little bit more about the background.
His past, that's huge.
And his past, which is massive, which was, I don't think anybody knew on the front end. This is about as depressing and sad a case as we have heard of in a long time. And the good news is the reaction has been very visceral, very strong, very
And
different than
unanimous.
going back to the OJ days.
The judge bought the choir boy persona that he sold at the trial, talking about the swimmer, and it was anything but. His
All right,
past
guys.
was anything
Absolutely,
but that
right.
choir boy persona.
Moving on, the doping ban on Russian athletics team competing internationally will remain in place and rule them out of the Rio Olympics this summer. Dan.
Well, actually, you know what? The more I think about this,
I know where you're going.
they may be, on the one hand, devastated.
I know.
But they also may be breathing a sigh of relief.
Exactly.
Because they might not die going to Rio based on what we've heard. Whatever you breathe, if you get near the water, whatever, it's going to
Crime rates are
kill
off the
you.
charts.
Exactly. So they may be grandstanding now about lack of due process, but in the end, knowing what we do about Rio, they actually might be relieved.
All right, guys,
It's
we do
funny.
have to get to this
Thought of the
last
same
one
thing.
real quick. When you're Rookie of the Year and your birthday is during minicamp, there's only one thing that can happen, right? A pretty good prank. Vikings wide receiver Laquan Treadwell's Range Rover filled with more than 60,000 fruit snacks.
Look at that. 60. What kind of car was it? Do we remember?
Brett
Range
just said
Rover.
Range Rover.
Oh, Range Rover.
That's a big
That's
car.
a lot. That is a lot. You know what? He's one of the guys now.
He is. He's
Those
in the club.
wacky. The Vikings are so wacky.
He's in the club. All I'll say
You
to
know what
Brett
else?
is
And they're loose.
It
shows they're very loose.
They got the day off. They're confident.
true.
All I would say to our rookie
Yeah.
in the box down there is be careful when you open your car door when you walk out of the Fox 9
How do
studios
you even
tonight.
get that many? Where do
In
you
the NFL,
go?
well, you just go to the distributor. You
Is that what
say
you do?
you make a phone call and you say,
And
I'm,
how
I'm
much
Kyle
does that
Rudolph.
cost? Or is
I'm
it
assuming
free
they got
because
it
they
free.
get such great publicity?
It's been everywhere.
What kind of candy?